Welcome back to a new episode. In this episode, we're going to be discussing the women in Matthew's genealogy. So here they are: Tamar, Rahab, Bathsheba, and Ruth. Now, it's interesting that Matthew has included women in his genealogy because most genealogies throughout the Bible don't include women. So these immediately pique our attention. And the question that naturally arises is, why has Matthew included these specific women? What do these women share in common? Why would Matthew include these women and not others? And that's what we're going to be analyzing in this video. What links all these women together? So let's begin with an analysis of each of these women separately. The one you're probably least familiar with is Tamar. So I'm going to dedicate a large portion of this video to simply explaining to you who Tamar is. In Matthew 1 verse 3, we are told that Judah, the father of Perez and Zerah, by Tamar. Now, we have to note the fact that Matthew has derived his genealogy from the genealogy in 1 Chronicles. And in 1 Chronicles, in the genealogy, when we're reading about Judah, we learn that his daughter-in-law, Tamar, also bore him Perez and Zerah. So perhaps the reason why Matthew has included Tamar is simply because his source in 1 Chronicles has likewise included her. However, there's probably a deeper reason than that. So let's spend some time exploring who Tamar is. Let's first take note of who Judas' sons are. In 1 Chronicles, we are told that the sons of Judah are Onan, and Shelah. These three, Bathsheba, the Canaanite, bore him. So let's just put down a list of Judah's first three sons, Onan, and Shelah. Very good. Let's now spend some time learning about Tamar. The story of Tamar is found in Genesis 38. Let's start in verse 6, and we're told, "And Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar." So very simple, is told that he will marry Tamar. We continue reading, "But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord put him to death." So is killed. We're not told why, but he's dead. So now the question is, who is Tamar going to marry now? And we're told in verse 8 that, "Then Judah said to Onan, 'Go into your brother's wife and perform the duty of a brother-in-law to her, and raise up offspring for your brother.'" So Judah tells Onan to marry his dead brother's wife, Tamar. And the reason he does this is due to a law known as Levirate marriage. We find out more about this law in Deuteronomy 25. We're told, "If brothers dwell together and one of them dies and has no son, the wife of the dead man shall not be married outside the family to a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go into her and take her as his wife and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. And the first son whom she bears shall succeed to the name of his dead brother, that his name may not be blotted out of Israel." So in other words, the first son Onan and Tamar have together will not be named after Onan, but rather they will receive the name of Onan's dead brother And Onan knows this law. And because he knows this law, we read that, "But Onan knew that the offspring would not be his. So whenever he went into his brother's wife, he would waste the semen on the ground so as not to give offspring to his brother." And here is an image of this happening. So here is Tamar being quite distressed over the fact that Onan is depriving her of children because he's spilling his seed on the ground. And God finds out about this, and he is likewise distressed over what Onan is doing. And we read, "And what he did was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and he put him to death also." So now Onan is dead for spilling his seed on the ground. So who is Tamar going to marry next? And we're told in the next verse, "Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, 'Remain a widow in your father's house till Shelah, my son, grows up.'" So we're told that Judah promises that Tamar will get to marry Shelah once he's old enough. If you continue reading in verse 11, but you find this strange sentence, "For he feared that he would die like his brothers." This is a bit ambiguous. It becomes clear when you refer to other translations like the NLT. The NLT translates this sentence as, "But Judah didn't really intend to do this because he was afraid Shelah would also die like his two brothers." So in other words, Judah had no intention of giving Shelah to Tamar because he was afraid that Shelah would die like his first two sons. Perhaps Judah thought that Tamar was in a sense cursed and that whoever marries this woman winds up dead. So Judah lies to her and says, go back to your father-in-law's house, go back to your father's house, and I'll call you when Shelah is old enough. Now, as time goes on, Tamar realizes that she's never going to get to marry Shelah. So she devises a plan to get pregnant. And what she does is that one day she finds out that Judah is coming to her town. So she takes off the garments of a widow and she puts on a veil. Now, a veil back in those days was the clothing of a prostitute. So she puts on this clothing and she seduces Judah. We read this: when Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. We go on to read that Judah has sex with Tamar, and later on, Tamar bears twins, Perez and Zerah. We also read that in order for Tamar to have sex with Judah, he gives her a pledge of a ring. And that's why in all the images, in all the paintings of Judah and Tamar, Judah is giving Tamar a ring as a pledge to have sex with her. And in all the images, you're going to find that Tamar is wearing a veil, because that is the sign of a prostitute. And it allows her to conceal her identity from Judah as well. So here's another image. Here's a Rembrandt. So as you can see, Tamar has her face covered and Judah is about to have sex with her. And here are just a couple more images. Here's an image of Judah overcome with a lust when he sees Tamar. And here's another image of Judah giving a ring to Tamar as a pledge. So what do I want you to take away from this discussion of who Tamar was? Quite simply, Tamar was a prostitute. This is going to be an important point. So just take that in note. Tamar was a prostitute. Let's now go to our second woman, who is Rahab. Now, I'm not going to spend nearly as much time of discussing who Rahab is. In Matthew verse 5, we read Salmon, the father of Boaz, by Rahab. Now, Rahab is from Joshua chapter 2. She is the woman who hides the spies in Jericho. We read, and Joshua, the son of Nun, sent 2 spies secretly from Shechem as spies, saying, go, view the land, especially Jericho. And they went and came into a house of a prostitute whose name was Rahab, and lodged there. Hopefully, you're already starting to pick up a pattern. Tamar was a prostitute. Rahab was a prostitute. That can't be a coincidence. 2 prostitutes. Let's continue to read. Let's continue to our next woman, who is Bathsheba. Now, Bathsheba should be very familiar to all of you. Matthew in verse 6 says, and David was the father of Solomon by the wife of Uriah. Now, why has Matthew referred to her as the wife of Uriah? Why hasn't he simply said Bathsheba? This becomes even more peculiar when we consider Matthew's source, which we said before was 1 Chronicles. In 1 Chronicles, we're told that these were born to him, David, in Jerusalem, Shema, Shobab, Nathan, and Solomon, 4 by Bathsheba. So in Matthew's source, it says Bathsheba. But Matthew changes Bathsheba into the wife of Uriah. So why on earth has Matthew made this change? Hopefully it's obvious to you already why he's done so. He's reminding us of the fact that David was an adulterer, that David bore children from a woman who was the wife of another man. This point is made particularly well by Catherine Sider Hamilton in her book, when she notes the following: 1 Chronicles, to which Matthew is indebted, as at least in part for his genealogy, by contrast with Matthew, lists Bathsheba like Tamar by name. Matthew names Tamar in keeping with 1 Chronicles 2:4, but does not name her Bathsheba. In his phrase, the wife of Uriah, he in fact echoes not 1 Chronicles, but the story of David and Bathsheba in 2 Samuel 11-12. There, the wife of Uriah is used to describe Bathsheba 4 times, every time specifically in association with Uriah's death. The phrase, the wife of Uriah, in 2 Samuel 11-12 serves to emphasize David's sin. So the reason why Matthew has employed the term the wife of Uriah instead of simply referring to her as Bathsheba is to remind his audience that Solomon was born out of adultery, that's better. Adultery. So here is yet another connection between these women. So let's go back to all our women and let's just take stock. So a good theory linking them all together is that they're all sexually deviant, right? They're all involved in sexual sin. We know that Tamar acted as a prostitute. We know that Rahab was a prostitute. And we know that Bathsheba committed adultery. So all these women fit the theory of sexual sin. However, Ruth does not. Ruth does not commit adultery. Ruth is not a prostitute. She really breaks this theory. It all fitted very well until we come to Ruth. Yet I am not quick to abandon this theory simply because it explains so much as to why these first three women were included. Also, it explains why Matthew would refer to Bathsheba as the wife of Uriah instead of just calling her Bathsheba as his source does. So let's not be too hasty in abandoning this theory. But of course, if we say that this theory has merit, we're left with the question of why would Matthew want his readers to know that Jesus has sexually deviant women in his genealogy? What would Matthew's purpose be in reminding his audience of this fact? And I think the answer to this question is the fact that we do not have 4 women in Matthew's genealogy. We in fact have 5 women in Matthew's genealogy. And the 5th woman is none other than Mary. Now, how does Mary tie into this theory? Well, a very early critique of the Christian faith was that Mary was an adulterer. She committed adultery. So perhaps the reason why Matthew has included adulterous women is to in fact defend Mary. Hopefully this has all piqued your interest. How exactly is Mary an adulteress? Well, I'm going to be discussing all of this in my next video, and I hope you join me then. Goodbye.